Well, hi everyone. I am here with our first podcast for FREA, Finding Recovery and Empowerment from Abuse. And stay tuned for a fantastic interview and the possibility that we might do more things like this. I kind of like the idea of it. So, anyway, without any further ado, I want to welcome to us here and to you, introduce to you, Lisa Forbes. Lisa is the author of I Can Take It From Here, a memoir of trauma, prison, and self-empowerment. She is also the founder of a nonprofit of the same name. Kirkus Reviews says of her book that it's an inspiringly courageous memoir. Just what I think we want to hear. So I think it's a remarkable reflection on a journey from darkness to what a friend of mine, David Gruder, calls impactful resiliency. She is and will ever more so continue to make a profound impact on the lives of people coming out of prison, the prison system, and those who have experienced life gone sideways as a result of childhood abuse and neglect, and anyone who has the bounty of meeting her in life and through her book and work. Her story about overcoming profound adversity and trauma by using tapping is incredibly inspiring and a testament to our own capacity for healing and self-empowerment. So, welcome, Lisa. I'm
Thank-
delighted to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here as well. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Well, I would like to start. I mean, the place that, of course, makes the most sense is to start with you talking about your journey, right? What is it that you want people to know about this journey that you have been on of, from trauma to healing and empowerment?
Well, what I really want people to understand, first of all, is that when I talk about trauma, I'm not speaking from theory. I'm really speaking from deep personal experience with various levels of trauma to a severe degree. So I want people to know that when I say that tapping healed trauma, the depth of what it healed is extremely personal to me and that it can reach with them wherever they are. I don't want people to say, "Oh, well, they don't know what I've been through." That's why I wrote the book, so that people would know what I went through, so that they could understand that I do know what they went through. And
Mhm.
I want them to know that that with tapping and the emotional freedom techniques that I just stumbled across, I was able to achieve a healing that has been deep and permanent.
Mhm.
And when I come across people who tell me, "Oh, I've been in therapy for 20 years," I'm like, wait a minute, this is not how this is supposed to work. It is possible for you to be healed in a relatively short period of time, and to actually be free, rather than to spend your life trying to get free. I want people to understand that freedom from emotional trauma is actually possible, and it's not something that needs to take decades to achieve.
Mhm. Beautiful, beautiful. That's such a wonderful way to start. Um, because when people hear about tapping, they don't know anything about it. And
Mhm.
our experience as humans here pretty much has taught us that we can't heal. I mean, there's so many voices saying you can't heal. The best you can do is manage, right?
Exactly.
And try and survive as a result. But recognizing and hearing from people like you, who have had these profound experiences of healing and now moving into thriving in your life, right?
Mhm.
One of the phrases I like to use is, we can do this no matter what. I use the phrase in a lot of ways, but no matter what, no matter what the objections are, that, the fears come up, it's like we are much more capable of more than we've ever, I think, known. And I think you're such a testament to that. So,
Thank you. And that the other thing is that, I try to make people understand, and I tell this in the book as well, that if I had needed to go to a doctor or to get a prescription or to be on medication or to go see someone, if in that moment that was what it had required of me to get help, I would not have ever gotten it because I was unemployed. I did not have any insurance. I did not have any money. I was sitting in a house that was in pre-foreclosure, and that was when I came across tapping on a computer. So this idea that, no, we need to if people need to be on medication, I'm far be it from me to tell them not to be on it. But for those people whose symptoms are completely manageable, even to the depth of which mine was, by something that does not require anything except knowledge and their fingertips. This is what we need to be getting to people because people do not need to feel as if I can't get help because I don't have any money. This is not true.
right.
I can't get help because I don't have insurance. This is not true. I want people to understand that freedom is possible regardless of where you are at this moment and up to and including if you're sitting in a prison cell. It's possible for you right now to start working on your freedom and to attain emotional freedom. It is literally at your fingertips.
hmm And even if you are on medication, right? Even if you feel like you're on profound medication and you have been told that you might not ever function any better, right? Um,
Right.
so,
It is compatible. If you're on something that is helping you, it can help you even more.
right,
But if
exactly.
if you're not on anything and you're saying it's impossible for me to get help, you are in the right place to learn tapping
Mhm.
because it is a profound healing method for
Mhm.
profound trauma.
Yeah.
That's been
Yeah.
my personal experience.
When I first learned it now 26 years ago, I think, one of the first things that really struck me about it was this element of self-empowerment. I
Mhm.
didn't have to go to somebody else to help me heal, right? Like you said, I had right in my fingertips what I
Exactly.
needed. And the fact that I could do that on my own, I could do it any time of the day or night
Right.
in the midst of something happening or after it happens to try to recover from what happened. Like that was so freeing just in and of itself.
And people talk about preventing crime or preventing violence. And one of my favorite quotes is, there's a quote that says, in between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that
Mhm.
space lies our freedom. So the thing is, if in that space you're blocked with trauma, you actually don't have the freedom to make a different response. Trauma dictates your response. So
Exactly.
the value really of having EFT taught to people is that when they get this stimulus, that for many of them previously would have resulted in an automatic response of violence or anger or something traumatic.
Mhm.
In that moment,
Mhm.
in that gap, that's when they can tap.
Mhm.
That is where crime prevention can occur because in this moment I can make a different decision. But
Mhm.
if I don't have a tool that gives me a different decision, then
Mhm.
I don't have the freedom that a non-traumatized person might have to stand in that gap and make a different decision. That is what people get a lot of times at trial. People will say, the prosecution will say, well, you could have made a different decision. Maybe not.
Right.
Maybe not. Because in between what happened and you're saying you had a minute to think about it, if trauma had hijacked me in that moment, I
Mhm.
didn't have a minute to think about it. I was at that moment. The only thing I could do was what trauma would tell me to do.
Hmm.
If we can clear that space out for people, we can not only heal trauma, we can prevent future traumatic acts, future crimes. So this is a huge opportunity to really, support the evolution of humanity.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, one of the things about that space, kind of the way I language it often, is that in trauma, our brains, well, our whole bodies actually go immediately into fight and flight, some
Mhm,
level of intensity of fight and flight. And when that intensity reaches, if you think of a 10-point scale, that intensity reaches 8, 9, 10 plus in a less than a split second, then you are shifted from a state where you can think about something to a state where you're all reaction. And like you
exactly.
said, that reaction is it's from the trauma. It's the trauma reaction, right?
Mhm.
So it is, in my experience, and it'd be interesting to hear what you have to say about this too, that in my experience, there is a learning period for people who don't just learn this, like, and they know it and they know how to help themselves navigate their emotional life in a more effective way. And you're already traumatized and you already have these patterns, that it is what seems to happen is that people begin to get it more on the backside. Like something already happened. We engaged in some reactive behavior, and then all of a sudden, our conscious awareness comes back online, and it's like, oh, this is what just happened. Like, let me now do the work to clear, right? So there
Mhm.
is a bit of time in it's almost like unpacking the inside of a baseball. I always think, it's like softening, opening it up a little bit. So
Mhm.
people just have that, they can breathe, they can say, wait, they can just have that pause that
Mhm.
says, wait, there's another option.
Mhm. Agreed. When I came across tapping, I really did not know what I was looking for. I went online and started searching for childhood patterns, childhood trauma. I didn't even know what I was looking for.
Mhm.
I just knew that I saw myself repeating my childhood.
Mhm.
And because I was repeating childhood experiences, I had enough awareness to know that I had just come out of 14 years of incarceration. If I'm repeating childhood experiences, it means I could also repeat the consequence of it. So I began to make the connection between this repetition I was seeing and recidivism.
Mhm.
And for me, that was an absolute no can do. I was not going back. And so I had to figure out how to break that chain because I saw myself heading along a predictable path.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I was fortunate because I had the literacy and the ability to go on and search and find and read and think. But most people don't realize that this population reads at or below a sixth grade level. So I was able to do things that this population of 100 million people who have some sort of a criminal conviction. 19 million Americans have a felony. Nearly 100 million have a uh, some kind of criminal background, even if it's only a misdemeanor. So this is a huge population that has very low literacy rates combined with high adverse childhood experiences, high PTSD rates, high rates of trauma. When I saw that what it took for me to go and find it would not be something that they would be able to do on their own for the most part, then it became my mission to take it to them. I wanted my life to be where I would shorten their path to finding
Mhm.
it because it was a circuitous long path for me, but I was able to make it. But for some people, if they had to take that long path, they would never make it.
Mhm.
So I wanted to become the person who shortened their path.
Mhm. Mhm. And that is, in fact, what you have done, isn't it? Yeah. So, I imagine people listening now are wanting to know a little bit more. You've alluded to a few things about your past and said a little bit more about being in prison. Can you share with people some more about that so that they feel like, you like you'd said, like I've lived it. This is the kind of trauma I experienced, and I want you to know that it's not just not theory for me. So I'd
So
appreciate, yeah.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the housing projects. I was the youngest of six children. And as many people will understand that in a dysfunctional household, everything rolls downhill. So I got the experience of all of my other traumatized siblings and parents' trauma as well. My father was an alcoholic. When I was 4 years old, I got hit by a car. My I have a When I was 8 years old, my one of my brothers started sexually molesting me every day. This lasted throughout my teens. I had all kinds of bullying at school, sibling bullying. Basically, if you name. So by the time I was about 10 years old, I was considering committing suicide, and I had suicidal thoughts throughout my childhood, but I was a good student. Books were my refuge. I used to try to get lost in books, and so I graduated from high school when I was 15. But my mother was in a religion that was convinced that the end of the world was imminent, as in it could start any minute now. And so she said that they did not believe in worldly knowledge, because you're not going to need worldly knowledge. The world's going to end soon. And so I graduated at 15, and instead of sending me to college, I got a worker's permit, and I became a full-time secretary in downtown Chicago at 15 years old with a worker's permit.
Mm,
At 16, I was pregnant by a man I met on that job.
mm,
And a couple of months after I turned 17, my daughter was born. And my daughter is one where I'm still dealing with all of this childhood sexual abuse, childhood bullying, childhood emotional abuse, childhood spiritual abuse. I had a head injury. I just, so you name it, I had really experienced it. And really in the midst of what I could only call a complete emotional breakdown at that point, I stabbed my daughter's father, and he died. And the prosecution charged me with premeditated murder. And so I was given a 25 year sentence, um, in a maximum security prison. I then I tell this story in detail in the book. While I was in prison, I had an attempted escape, and so I got another 3 years. So that was 28 years then that I had, and I served half of it. So I was in prison. I went into prison when I was 19, and I was 33 when I came home. 9 months after I was home, I married a man who was my father's age.
mm,
Now, I mentioned that I had five older siblings. My husband at the time had five children who were all older than me. So I almost, to the smallest detail, recreated my childhood.
mm,
So my father's age with my mother's personality with five older people, it was at some point it dawned on me, wait, I've been here before.
mm,
And that's when it really started sinking into me that I am simply recreating the past, and I do not want what that past led to become my future again. It's not a mystery that we have a 70 to 80% recidivism rate. It's because this incarceration does not break the chain of what created the crime in the first place. And so my experiences, again, detail. My book is called "I Can Take It From Here," but it's that title is what I call now my identity. It's my mantra that despite that past, I could take it from here. But that past, while I accept full responsibility for my crime, I tell my story for people to understand the context in which it was created. Because as I like to tell people, Holly, no 5-year-old, no 10-year-old, and when they're sitting in school and you ask what do you want to be when you grow up, no one says, I want to be a murderer. You know, no one says, I want to go to prison. We need to understand why people's lives are derailing like this. So I tell the story of my life. At 3 years old, I could read at a third grade level. How did I go from that to 14 years in prison? There's something caused that. And that's what we need to be looking at.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I mean, beautiful, maybe not the right word. I mean, because, but I mean, just the how you put all that, how you put it all together. I mean, the fact that you can talk about this past right now and not be triggered,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Not be triggered by it is absolutely the impact of tapping.
Yeah, yes,
Mhm.
correct. This is the end result. Not that you would be perpetually suffering,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
that at some point you would be healed. You
Mhm.
would be able to recognize what you have done, come to terms with what you have done, acknowledge the impact of your choices on your life and on other people's lives as well, if you have
Mhm.
committed a crime. But the charge is not there. The chain is broken so that it's not still existing in your energy system and causing you pain because it's that attachment that leads you to the suffering and also likely to the repetition.
Right. Right. So one of the things that we say is that we can actually, with tapping, get most things down to what we call a true zero, right?
Hmm.
Where there is no charge. You used the word earlier, permanent. Like the
Hmm.
change is permanent.
Hmm.
And I think it could really surprise some people listening that they could actually too get to a point where they could talk about their story in a way that is illuminating,
Hmm.
because you can only really illuminate and inspire on the other side of something,
Right,
right? And so there's a calmness, there's a capacity to stay centered and grounded that until we experience a huge degree, let's say, of healing, we cannot do, right?
right. And there's a saying that memory without the pain is wisdom.
Oh, I love it. I
Yeah, so
absolutely love it.
and
Yes.
so th
Yeah.
that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to
Mhm.
get people to, a state
Mhm.
of wisdom about your life. It's so that
Mhm.
you can move forward with wisdom rather than being stuck in pain.
Yeah, exactly. And how many people feel like that's their life? Like
Yeah,
to a point you had made when we had talked before, many people don't even realize that anything could be different in
right.
their lives.
And Holly, in the many of the women i- in the 14 years that I was incarcerated, I've just tried to stay in touch with, some of them or know of them, did they ever get out or what happened? A lot of those women, they got out, but they just never were the same. They were never whole. They were
Mhm.
never healed. They were
Mhm.
always suffering. And I actually know about 5 women who, after long periods of incarceration, got out and committed suicide.
Mhm.
So it is a very real thing because these are people, these are mothers, these are grandmothers, these are, wives, these are daughters, these are people's lives who are really at stake. Sometimes, with political descriptions and grandstanding and the media and whatnot, we get to think of people who, have been incarcerated or have committed a crime as those people, the other people, somebody else, not us. But when we really start looking at these numbers, that there are 100 million people who are justice impacted, as they call. There are 19 million people who have felony convictions. We cannot afford to keep calling these the others, the throwaway people, or they don't matter, because their trauma when they get out affects then their children, their communities. It goes on and on and on. So at some point, it's in our own self-interest to understand that taking something that is effective to this population is one of the best ways we can serve ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. And serve ourselves and serve our communities, our countries, our world, right?
That's right. Serve humanity.
Serve humanity because I
Right.
think we have little awareness generally of how traumatized much of humanity is,
Exactly.
right? And
Right.
how much that limits us, and our ability to become all we can be,
Right.
which is like right here, it's right here with
Right.
us, but can be so hard to access or almost impossible to access when
Exactly.
there's still this wall of trauma separating us from ourselves inside, right?
And I mentioned that I grew up in Chicago. I live now in the Denver area, and when when I moved to Denver, it was the first time I had ever seen aspen trees. And
Mm,
so I had a friend who took drove me through an aspen grove,
mm,
and it was just the most, for some reason I fell in love with that tree. It was the most beautiful thing. It spoke to me, and I started doing research on it, and I discovered something fascinating.
mm,
Actually, the largest aspen grove is in Utah. It's called Pondo. And I think there are 47,000 aspen trees in this grove. So we
mm,
call it. But actually, scientists say no, it's one tree. They call it a forest of one. And the reason is because these 47,000 trees have a single root system. They are all attached by one root. And so what appears to us to be 47,000 trees is merely up growths or shoots of one tree. They're clones. When I read that, I had a revelation. I said, wait a minute. The reason this speaks to me is because this is people. We look at all of our different social issues, homelessness, school shootings, domestic violence, suicide, child abuse. We look at all these different things as if they are separate growths. They are separate trees. They are not related at all. And we need a separate solution for one of them.
mm,
What if they are all offshoots of one thing? What if they have a single root
mm,
and that root is trauma?
oh, oh,
And so I made the connection that something spoke to me that just like all of those trees are intertwined at the roots, all of what we call these different social issues are intertwined at the roots. The Justice Department said that 90% of juvenile offenders have PTSD. At 60% of incarcerated women have PTSD from childhood experiences.
mm,
There's a study, the Grady Trauma Project, I think it's called. They show that the rates of PTSD and trauma in certain inner cities in the United States, they have trauma and PTSD rates equal to that of war zones. The level of PTSD in those communities is higher than that of combat soldiers. So we need to understand that this is not an accident, the why these people are acting out with these various uh, criminal acts, even, or acts of violence, or acts of self-violence.
mhm,
We need to address the trauma that is at the root of all of these things. And it just disturbed me so much that when I saw what EFT did for me,
mhm.
I said what it could do for all these other people if only we could get it to them.
Mm,
That became my mission.
okay. All right. Well, one thing I want to add to that, and that's great story and of course, a great metaphor.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that's where you were going until I was like, oh, I mean, because the other way of going is like, the, mm, not sure how to say it, but is to look at the tree as the tree of humanity, right?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I thought you were going, but it's like, oh, to make it the tree of trauma and how it has all these branches that have all these effects depending on which way they're facing the sun, kind of,
Yes,
right?
yes.
The one thing I want to add is that, the stats about PTSD, I think, give people an impression that there's less trauma than there is, actually.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because there are a lot of people who are really traumatized and it's really impacting their lives, their
Mm-hmm.
energy, their capacity to believe in themselves, to take risks, to take steps, to follow through, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't meet the criteria for
Yes.
PTSD.
Right. Right.
So
Yes,
yeah.
because I even in the book I tell people, I wrote the book uh with the intention of speaking to people who had been incarcerated. But then I started getting emails and responses from people who had never been incarcerated. But the book spoke to them as well, and I began to realize, sometimes your prison can be your house.
Mhm.
Your jailer can be your relationship. There are people who are in all types of trauma. It doesn't have to ever have committed a crime. Doesn't, but
Mhm.
relationship trauma, childhood trauma. It just you may not have PTSD or that level of anxiety. You may not be suicidal, but it is affecting your ability to be your best self. It's affecting your ability to have great relationships. It's affecting your ability to raise your children in the way you actually could envision yourself doing it because you don't know why you're in a state of constant irritation with
Mhm.
them. So yes, we are a traumatized society, not just a PTSD uh, uh,
Yeah.
diagnosed society, but traumatized in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So my dog is trying to jump on my lap. So
It's
excuse me,
okay.
everybody. And she was bark. If she barks again, I don't know if you could hear her bark, but big window and squirrels. So she was going after squirrels. I was like, oh no,
I couldn't
just,
hear.
just quiet down. So she may join us here because she's pretty insistent. But so I think this is a really good place to then begin to talk about the the introduction of trauma into your life, right? I'm sorry, the introduction of tapping into your life.
Mhm.
And as I said, in reading the book, and I think you lay it out this way, which is why it's easy for me to see it this way, that there are like four kind of chapters or segments to the tapping, your active healing tapping journey that you go through in the book. And the first one is that finding tapping, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm curious about at that first level, like, tell me or tell us, please, like what is it that tapping did for you initially? How did you use it initially? And what did it do? And what kind of difference did it start to make for you from the beginning?
The what I really wanted from tapping in the beginning was I was really, really tired of reliving the sexual trauma. That is what really had me hung up. I had the constant it just the feeling in my body was still there of feeling like I was being touched by people who weren't there anymore. I was and I had really reached a point where I wanted to be free of that particular suffering. And
Mhm.
so even though that is an area where generally we tell people don't go by yourself, don't start by yourself. Actually, that's where I dove in because that's where my greatest pain really was.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
daily experience. I was literally reliving that in my body. So I started when I got introduced to tapping, I was following along on some videos with Brad Yates, and he had this big book of tapping scripts. And I was following along with the scripts, but it didn't take me long to leave the script and just started saying my own words. And the first thing I noticed after, a couple of weeks of tapping was that I was actually thinking about it less. That's
Mhm.
the sexual trauma and molestation was something that was it was. I mean, I woke up with it.
Mm.
It was constant in my life. It was just always there. And at some point I began to notice that actually I hadn't thought about that today or had the, and so that was when I started realizing this thing works. Right? And so
Right.
now let me see what else it
Hmm.
can do. That for
Hmm.
me was where even though I don't disagree with professionals, don't go there by yourself with that deep level of trauma. For me, that was where I dove in and it worked for me.
Yeah. 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 And and maybe, in a professional way, that's a responsible thing to say. And
Hmm.
yet, how many people are trying to heal from trauma and do it outside of therapy too, right?
Right, right.
But that does bring up a couple of points because oftentimes when people dive into those really painful areas, they can sometimes, even with tapping, they can sometimes feel like a little destabilized, a little
Mhm,
shaky. They can be, I've heard so many times people are so afraid, like they have a fractured relationship with themselves.
mhm,
Part of it, I mean, that's what trauma fractures our relationship with ourselves, right?
mhm,
And part of that is that I'm holding all this past inside that I never wanted to deal with, and I try and push it away so I can go on. And now I'm going to turn and face it. So,
mhm.
what were, I wonder what were some of the ways that you helped yourself navigate some of those things that I imagine came up for you at that time too?
I had lots of physical manifestations of releases. I write about it in the book that if there was a point at which the toilet really became my very best friend. You know, I would,
Mm,
or sometimes I would tap
mm,
and
mhm,
I would feel like, okay, I need to just lay down for a second and close my eyes. And I would wake up 5 hours later.
mm,
My body went through a lot of processing, a lot of drinking water. I really put myself through an intensive program.
yeah, you did.
I had reached the point where I had said, that I'm just not going to live like this anymore. Something is going to work for me.
Mhm,
And if this has the ability to do it, I'm going to give it my all. And that's what for going forward with the working with other people, that's the commitment that we ask them to make. Don't You don't have to dive. We ask you to dive in, but we're going to dive in with you.
mhm,
But we ask you to commit to making that full dive, because if you tiptoe around in the shallows, you're not going to and your trauma is in the deep end,
mhm.
you're not going to experience the healing that's possible because you wouldn't go there.
Right,
So
exactly.
we create an environment in our nonprofit organization when we work with traumatized people. We create an environment where it's safe for you to go into the deep end, but we insist that you go there because if
Mhm,
you're in this program, we assume that you're here because you want to be free.
mhm,
And so the only way to be free of the deep end trauma is to dive in on the deep end. And that's what I did.
mhm.
I mean, I recognize also that I had some grace, people say, well, why do you think you didn't commit suicide? Why do you think? I don't know, Holly. I just, I mean, though that's the area where I say that was the grace of God.
Right.
Why didn't you do it and someone else did? I don't know. But what I do know is that when I went into the deep end, I went in by myself, and that's where I learned to swim in the
Mhm,
deep end. And
mhm,
so when we take people there, I consider myself well qualified to guide you through it because I went in by myself. So, if I wanted someone to teach me to swim, I want someone who has swum.
mhm.
Right? And so
Right.
we encourage people to not be afraid to dive into it because you got to go where the pain is in order to heal it.
Absolutely. So for people who are not going to be part of your program,
Mhm,
right? Because they haven't had this past that involves being in prison,
mhm,
right? One of the things that we could say is that first of all, it's really important to know that you come through on the other side, right? And the
mhm,
other side brings you gifts you can't imagine from this side of the work, right?
Right.
Where you do the
Exactly.
work, right? And that
Yes.
so if you are doing it on your own, the way Lisa did, right? That you like you think about where is my source of support? Who are the people that can support me that I can say, look, can I reach out to you when I'm doing, like if I'm feeling like a little overwhelmed or a little shaky or, can you be there for me? Now, not everybody has people who have the emotional capacity,
Hmm.
even if they want to be
Hmm.
able to be there, right?
Hmm.
And
You know
so,
what? We, eh, if a person is not in our program, Operation I Could Take It From Here, because they are not a formerly incarcerated person, I would still say that it's someone like myself, a practitioner, or anyone else. I would still be willing to help them, though. You
okay.
know, yeah, I would still be willing to help them. You don't have to be, and if it's not me personally, I could direct you to someone else. Yeah.
Well,
So
absolutely.
yes,
Yes,
yes, we have to
absolutely.
we have to link arms and build this community. So I would never tell anybody who is dealing with this, don't reach out to me unless if you've been incarcerated. No,
Okay.
because
All right.
we're in it
Okay.
with you to heal humanity.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for clarifying that. That's
Yeah.
important for everybody, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and then the other thing I wanted to say that if you don't reach out or you don't reach out immediately because, that's another thing about trauma, right?
Hmm.
Is
Hmm.
I can do it myself, right?
Hmm.
Like, and I've got to do it myself. I feel too ashamed or my circumstances are such that I feel like I can't afford, to your
Hmm.
point. Um, then, and you don't feel like there are people in your life for that kind of support. One of the things that dawned on me in my life that was that some of the greatest support through my childhood, well, perhaps the greatest support through my childhood that I got from nature. I got
Hmm.
from trees, I got from being outside. And to
Hmm.
recognize that we are nurtured also by nature,
Hmm.
right? But like when people are young, stuffed
Hmm.
animals are nurturing, like birds. I mean, there are other ways besides people that God, the universe, brings to us to help us know that we're supported and not alone,
Right.
right? So I want to add that. And I also want to say there are a couple of apps too that people can get
Hmm.
that help people through trauma, help people
Hmm.
through anxiety, trouble sleeping, relationship issues. So one of them is by the Ortners, the Tapping Solution
Hmm.
app, and I have clients who've found that really helpful, um,
Hmm.
and they've developed it for quite a bit over the past number of years. So it's got a lot of different scripts to it.
And another one that I learned of is called Libby Health, Libbie.
Okay.
Libby, and it's Libby is short for liberation.
Oh, good. I
Yeah,
love it.
and
I
so
love it.
it also is designed to really emphasize that this we're talking about your emotional liberation. We're talking about your emotional freedom.
Yeah,
And
right.
so yeah, Libby Health also has an app that they're trying to direct to people who, may not otherwise have ever had any access to
Yeah.
tapping.
Okay. So then there's a couple of other, as long as we're mentioning this. There's one Peaceful Heart Network, and they are
Mhm.
out of Sweden, but they do training all over the country, a lot of training in English. They've been here many times.
Mhm.
Um, they started doing work with people who had experienced genocide. And they
Yeah.
have a very interesting story of their origin and how they felt compelled to begin to help people heal. And so they
Hmm.
have what they call trauma tapping technique,
Mm-hmm.
and they offer their trainings for free. And they also have an app that's a freely available app
Mm.
help for trauma, self-help
Okay.
or self-healing for
Mm.
trauma. So and that's a very simple, they created a little animated character and it doesn't use words because they work in so many different languages. So a person accesses sensations in their bodies or emotions or memories. And then they tap along with this little cute little character
Hmm.
and use that. So, and it also helps people feel like they're not doing it on their own. So they
So,
set.
programs like that that go into war-torn countries, this is actually one of the things uh, that we're basing our what we do on. We are replicating the Veteran Stress Project using the
Right. Good.
demographic.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, using the demographic of formerly incarcerated people instead of veterans, but also the idea that people take tapping into war-torn countries, into Africa and things like that. We recognize, for me, the war-torn country is the South Side of Chicago.
Hmm.
For me, that
Yeah. Yeah.
we I for
Hmm.
that is my focus, and I like to connect with people who are doing that to see how they're doing it, because I believe that it is absolutely exactly what is needed right here in our
Hmm.
own countries. We have
Yeah.
communities where kids have, they wake up every morning going to kindergarten dodging bullets. Don't tell me that's not a war zone, right?
Right.
Don't tell me that these
Absolutely.
kids are supposed to be able to go to school and focus on ABCs when they just dodged bullets.
Mhm.
So I'd like to connect with them, because we take what they do in, some country in Africa or somewhere, or Europe or somewhere, and say, okay, and now let's apply it to the west side of
Mhm.
Chicago.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And there's also through the ASEP, the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, there is part of the website called R for R.
mhm.
Um, I'm blanking. Something for resilience. Oh, I know I should know it. But but what they offer is they have short videos on first aid. They're really focused on emotional first aid techniques for people who have been traumatized. And one of the people who's been responsible for developing all that is a friend who has really done a tremendous amount of work in she lives in Northern California, so places where people are hit by fires, right?
Hmm.
And their whole communities are damaged by these wildfires, right? Or people like and the flooding that's
Right.
happening. So and that's a whole other kind of trauma. It's not that,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
And so yeah.
Exactly. That's an excellent point you just made when we talk about, again, that it sometimes when you use these statistics, it really minimizes the amount of trauma. But it doesn't have to be sexual trauma. It doesn't have to be childhood trauma.
Mhm.
What kind of trauma is it to lose everything you've ever had? You've been in this house 25 years and now it's all ashes. There's all kinds of trauma that people are dealing with. And we all need all the support that we can get without everyone needing to be on a pill or on a medication. Sometimes that's not what you need. You just need something effective that gets it out of your energy system.
Right, exactly. Getting it out of your energy system then also gets it at the same time out of all of what I call the subsystems, right?
Yeah.
Out of
Hmm.
our neurology, out of our, physiology, out of our
Hmm.
neurochemistry, right?
Right,
Out of our
right,
thoughts, out of our cognition, like shifts
right.
our perspectives, shifts our beliefs, shifts our emotional patterning,
Exactly.
right?
And, even down to the physical, how much of what we call metabolic illnesses are really things that have stress related, where your body is constantly, you've been flooded with cortisol and adrenaline since all your life, or, however many years, and then, oh, gee, you have hypertension. I wonder why. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Or you have a
Yes.
sugar addiction. I wonder why.
Exactly.
I wonder why I'm always trying to comfort myself with food.
Mm.
Many of these things that we think are just habitual or they're just medical illnesses, we know they are stress related. And tapping brings down that cortisol so that your body even has the ability to heal some physical illnesses.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There are many stories of people healing, using tapping to help heal, like cancer too,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
Right.
and the emotional components of cancer, the antecedents to your point, like,
Hmm.
some people say, what were the traumas you had in your life? And that has something to do with where cancer lodges itself in your brain. There's a
Right.
whole medical system based on that, right?
Yeah,
So absolutely, it's holistic, right? So our approach is really holistic, and in that sense, tapping is inherently holistic, right?
exactly.
Because it works with the energy system, which is infused throughout the whole of us, right?
Mhm.
Okay, all right. So this is wonderful. So, and hopefully really helpful and interesting to everybody else listening. So, then there were, let's see, I'm trying to think about how we've covered some of what we talked about covering, like the next stage of the sort of your healing experience. And then moving into the deeper work, but you kind of, in a way, you kind of said that because you said what you really wanted, you really needed to focus on and wanted to focus on was the sexual trauma, right?
Hmm.
And that's what
Right.
was on in your brain. And it was almost like you began to work through successive levels of
Right.
how that was impacting. And then, but there is one part of this healing, your healing journey that I do want to take a little bit more time with, okay?
Hmm.
And it is when there are two things. One is when you were talking about the healing with James and
Hmm.
around the stabbing of him and then his dying, right?
Hmm.
And you were talking about that in I mean it's just oh she's gonna Bridie, please. Please. Um, so you're talking about that in the impact that that had on you,
Hmm.
and that what is it I want to say about that? That there was something in that about the courage and the bravery to do what you did. And the thing that struck me the most about that particular piece, before I go on, is your willingness to say, you know what, to really heal, I need to let myself be open and consider the impact of my actions on everybody else in his life.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that is what I mean when I say that this connecting of trauma as a causative factor to violent crime is not to excuse crime. It's not to minimize the impact of it or to say, oh well, they were a victim too. That's not the point. The point is that I really can't. The full healing requires me to not only just sit in a cell somewhere and after so many years, okay, you get out and you haven't really addressed the issue. Empathy is part of healing. Develop the absence of empathy is a major factor in our what's happening in our world today, the things that we justify being done to other people or doing to other people. It's an absence of empathy. And it became important to me to recognize that what I had done in causing removing someone from their family, from their aside from just taking their life, that person they had a wife, they had a nephew, they had parents, everyone's life gets impacted by crime. And so it's not just that I'm healing myself, but I'm also recognizing that I'm trying to energetically send healing to them as well. And I can't do that if I don't really have the courage to face what I did to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it became important to me to revisit the day of that crime and could I see it from their perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Could I see it from the perspective of of him? Could I see it from the perspective of of the people who loved him? It is so that it's not just about me. It's a holistic healing, and also, that was also my daughter's father. Could I see it from her perspective? There are many
Um,
perspectives to see crime from them. We have to find a way to have. People say, "Oh, well, I'm not. I don't have any empathy for anybody but the victim." That's fine. Have empathy for the victim, have empathy for the perpetrator if you can. But really, we want to emphasize that we are not minimizing the impact of the impact on the victim.
yeah.
And we are not making ourselves the victim in our healing.
Mhm.
But for me personally, that revelation came as it occurred to me that I had never really considered it from their perspective.
Mhm.
That to me was a huge growth thing.
Oh,
I just it's like, what did that day look like to them? What did that experience look like to them? How were they impacted? How were they still impacted? When I wrote the book, I learned that one of his family members actually read my book,
oh,
and my
really?
daughter is still in touch with that side of her family. She made it her business to be in touch with them. And so
Mhm.
it became to me, I wanted to be large enough to do that, Holly. I wanted to be a large enough person to say I'm working with this population, but I'm holistic enough to understand that it's one thing. I want it
Mhm.
to be large enough to wrap that energetic healing. If I never talk to them, if I never say to them physically, I'm sorry, I wanted to send that emotionally. I wanted to
Mhm.
send that energetically.
Mhm.
That to me was part of my healing. That
Mhm.
I cannot sit, as I said in the book, I can't sit on somebody's grave and tap on me. I got to recognize that my life impacted this person, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so for me, it was it was that was the depth of freedom, Holly,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
EFT
Yeah.
gave
Well
me.
put. Yeah.
That was
Mhm.
the depth of freedom that I could be free enough to even see it from their perspective.
Mhm. Yeah. And
That's what
that
EFT did.
And that is one of the major moments, I'm going to say, and you
Mhm.
you can disagree, but it seems to me that that's one of the major moments of transformation in your life and necessary for you to become the person you are, like to manifest who you are. Without that, you would it would impact you in a
Yes.
limiting way.
Yes.
And that courage to do that, to take responsibility at
Right.
that level is
Right.
just profound, right?
Thank you. That I wanted, and that's a good thing that I wanted to emphasize as well about tapping, because even in some of Brad Yates's tapping, he talks about forgiving other people for what they did. Again, he says, because I choose to be that free. I even wanted to enlarge that. I choose to be free enough to see it from my victim's perspective. I
Mhm.
choose to be that free. I choose to recognize that energetically we aren't disconnected.
Mhm.
And so, to the extent that I can even send in energy to them, love to them, for concern for them, recognition for them, that is also that
Mhm.
we're clearing the planet.
Yeah.
We're clearing the planet of all of this pain and all of this, entanglement that we have. If we're all emotionally entangled, then I can't heal myself and have no concern for how I impacted you. What EFT enlarged that space for me, that mental space that allowed me to be that free.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Really, it's precious. There's something and precious about you and your capacity and your willingness to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So then moving on, like you would think, well, that was really good, right? Like I'm good to go now. But but what happened was as you continued to do that healing and that profound level of healing, you recognized, you opened up, the layers sort of peeled away And you could see that there was more healing to do, right? And I would love for you to read from your book that passage about when you like make that determination that you're going back to Chicago and you're going to do that level of healing work. Do
With
you
other
have it?
people.
I could read it. Well,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. Read, you can read it if you
Okay,
don't
but
mind.
you know
Yeah.
what? I have to, this is totally unprofessional, I'm sure, but I have to
No.
run and get the book. I'll be right
Okay.
back.
Go get it. Okay. Okay.
All right. So fortunately, very close. Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. So, this was the chapter called Armageddon,
Mm-hmm.
and talking about your brother
Mm-hmm.
and the sexual abuse. And so, so I'm going to start here on the last page, and you say, grappling with those memories for decades had mentally and psychologically exhausted me. Treating my anxiety and other lasting effects of my trauma wouldn't be easy. I needed help, but I also accepted that I would have to push myself. I would have to be willing to do the work. I had lived with the idea of imminent Armageddon all my life, thanks to my mother and her religious fears. Quote, then there will be a great tribulation such as not occurred since the world's beginning, she said, quoting from the Bible. But I no longer had the luxury of even subconsciously worrying about Armageddon. I was about to fight my own life and death struggle. I could tell that the hardest battle I was ever going to fight was the war between what I knew, which was that I wasn't a bad person, and what I felt, which was that I must have somehow deserved what had happened to me. In my mind, I had to go back to Chicago. I had to climb those dark, urine-soaked stairs to the sixth floor of the housing projects where my brother had sexually abused me every day for years. I had to go home.
Mm-hmm.
I made a decision. I would approach Kirk the way I had approached James.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't change the past, but I could change the future. I couldn't change what I had done or what Kirk had done, but I could decide not to let the pain turn me into somebody I didn't want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the core of it. That was when I realized that I couldn't. That was like the eye of the tornado. I had to go in there because that was really the ache in my soul. That was
Mhm.
really the that something must have been wrong with me for that to happen. Like what that and I think that was the thing that, like many young people, it just once something warps your self identity, at a point where your identity is still being formed,
Mhm.
if you're going to reclaim your original blueprint, you have to go back to that place where the twisting first happened.
Mhm.
And so, just like I couldn't ignore the fact that, there's somebody in a grave because of me, I couldn't ignore that little girl, that 8-year old who was standing there, who was still inside of me, still needing to be healed, still needing
Mhm.
to be understood, still needing to be accepted, still needing to be talked to. I realized that I had to go back and talk to her, and just like I had to put myself in the mental and energetic space of James and of his family, I went back and just literally tried to become her again,
Mhm.
heal her, talk to her, and also come to terms with what things might have motivated Kirk?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I just really wanted to be that free. I wanted to understand that maybe something happened to him that caused him to do this. I really wanted to unravel all of those things because I did not want to have any, not only a chain, I didn't want to have a thread. I didn't want to have a sliver of hatred, of bitterness, of anger. I wanted to be free. And for me to be that free meant I had to go back to that spot where for me it all began
Mm-hmm.
and say and from the position of being that 8-year-old girl, I tapped
Mm-hmm.
for her and with her. You know, I spoke to her, I talked to her. I just really went to that deep place
Mm-hmm.
where the pain really had its deepest root. I
So
just had to go there.
yeah. So as you're saying this, I want to pause here for a minute. And I
Mhm,
want to say, if anybody's watching this, like on the one hand, I'm sure people are really inspired
mhm,
by our conversation, by your story, more than our conversation, but you
mhm,
and our and your story. But some people might also be being triggered right now
mhm,
because we are talking about, very difficult things. And so I want you to know that if you are, my camera keeps adjusting, that my hands down go to tapping activity when
mhm.
in the moment is what's called the thymus thumb.
Yes. Mhm.
And yeah, so you're tapping on your thymus.
Right.
So
Mhm.
it's just using the back of your hand or the
Mhm.
pads of your fingers. You're tapping right on the sternum bone.
Mhm.
And as you tap there and then breathe, um, and just continue to do that, what you're going to experience is that the emotion, the charge is like a wave and
Mhm.
it's coming up and it wants to crest. You probably want to push it down. But with this, which is kind of like a supporting, nurturing other, right?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
can do this and you will be able to move through that charge that's kind of taking over your body and
Mhm.
it will recede just like a wave and it will
Mhm.
become calmer and quieter again. And this particular technique can take you out of an anxiety attack. It's
Mhm.
very powerful. All right. So if that's happening for anyone right now, like I encourage you to do that. You
Mhm.
could brush your hands down your arms, which is really soothing and
Mhm.
calming, perhaps afterwards. Um, and I was thinking of just going through, we've been talking about tapping,
Mhm.
just showing people that the points, and if you want, as we,
Sure. Yeah, we could just,
right, the points
right.
are up on the top of the head. And I usually do two hands, but it
I
doesn't,
do too.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and then right on the hairs of the eyebrows, at the bridge of
Mhm.
the nose, and then right in the temples, on the side of the eyes, right at that corner, and then right on the bone, right underneath your eyes, right in the center. And as we're tapping through, we're breathing too, and thinking about the out breath is sending out the molecules of the trauma and the stress and the neurochemicals that are generated in our bodies from this,
Mhm.
right? And then below our lips, and then collarbones, like right under at the base of your collarbones.
Mhm.
Sometimes I just tap kind of all around.
Yeah.
Nice deep breathing. There are a lot of really good spots here to hit.
Mhm.
And
Right.
then,
Yeah.
right, and then again, I have to move the camera. The sides of your body, like
Yeah.
halfway down your ribs, tapping on the sides. And now people do a number of things. There are a lot of variations on a theme, but
Mhm.
one of the simple versions right now is tapping on your
Yeah.
wrists, right?
Mhm.
And then I often end up here. But just for you, as we're going through this, or if you're still feeling, which I imagine, like just to remember this,
Right.
to go back and rewind. Like if you're in a spot right
Exactly.
now where
Mhm.
it feels pretty tough, like go back and rewind. We just walked you through the spots, and you like to a point I made earlier, we don't have to use words. So you can
Right,
just like let yourself feel what's happening, focus on that, and
right.
you'll have that same effect of this beginning to slow, like wash. And it's not retreating, it's not going back into hiding, right?
Mm-hmm,
Maybe some of it, but a lot of it is actually being released and moving
mm-hmm,
out.
mm-hmm,
So, okay. Okay. So just wanted to catch that. Um, so then you went home and you did that work.
mm-hmm,
Is that work, because this part's not in the book,
mm-hmm.
is that work that you did on your own as well?
Yes, there is a point, and this part is in the book. When I was in Colorado, I did work briefly with another practitioner,
Right.
so as you mentioned, when you work with someone else can be helpful because even working with myself, I did get to the point where I felt like I was stuck. Like I was tapping on the same thing and I wasn't, it's like maybe there is something that I'm not, my own mind isn't going there and I
Mhm.
need someone to see what I can't see. So I
Right,
did work
exactly.
briefly with someone else who did help me specifically in that area to maybe see some things and go there a little bit,
Mhm.
um, because we can't always see all of our own stuff as well. But
Yes.
yes, but for the most part, I really did a lot of it myself,
Hmm.
because I knew where I wanted to go. And for me, the proof of that, the what I like about the fact that I was able to do it for myself is
Hmm.
because now I feel totally confident telling people they can do it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
can do it
Mhm.
because I did. And there isn't anything special about me. So
Mhm.
if I could do it, you could do now, get help if you need it. And I did reach out when I did need it. But it
Mhm.
tapping is something where you can free yourself
Mhm.
and from even the deepest level of trauma. But there is something to be said though about tapping in relationship with other people. I tapped with other people as I began to be exposed to other people who were tapping, because there are some things, there's a saying that relational wounds require relational healing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I developed tapping friends and we tapped together and things like that.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's
Oh,
not like
beautiful.
just
Yeah.
always sitting in a room tapping by myself,
Mhm.
but tapping with a sense of self-empowerment. You
Mhm.
know, and in the and having someone, a friend tapping, along with me and witnessing my pain. There's something
Yeah.
healing about someone witnessing your pain and honoring your pain,
Yeah.
holding that space for your healing. So that's what we did.
Yeah. It was like and there's also a mutual self-empowerment, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
mirroring and the power of, yeah,
hmm and
having,
the borrowed benefits when they're tapping on their stuff and I'm tapping on my stuff. It may not be exactly the same things, but you borrow the benefits.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it just happens. It just
Yeah.
not something you do. It's like
Yeah.
I choose to do this right now. It is an effect. It's an inherent effect
hmm
of doing tapping,
Yes.
which makes tapping something, it has a gift in it
Yes.
that I just is absolutely remarkable. So,
Yes.
and really important. So, okay. Well, I wonder, is there anything else that you want to share? We've covered a lot, and I just so appreciate everything that you're bringing forth into the world for our healing, and the world's
Thank you.
healing.
Well,
Yeah. Oh, that's
what I
wonderful.
want to share is again that our goal at Operation, I could take it from here, which is our nonprofit, is we are working with 17 so far, EFT practitioners and licensed mental health professionals who are also committed to reaching this 100 million, uh,
Mhm.
re- what we call restored citizens,
Mhm.
formerly incarcerated people. And we are looking for people who, if you are formerly incarcerated, if anyone you know is, your family is, we are looking for people who are willing to help us do this outreach, because this is what we plan to. what I'm planning to be my gift to humanity. My goal is to reach 100 million people and put tapping at their fingertips, because I can envision a world that would be so different if we were all doing this tapping in the moment, that we really would make a difference in how we responded to that thing. You
Exactly.
know, so
Mhm.
please contact me. I can take it from here .org or lisaforbesspeaks.com. We want to connect with people who understand that tapping is life changing, and
Mhm.
it is easily taught, it is easily learned, and it just makes all the difference. And if
Mhm.
that's something that somebody can support, please reach out to us.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And I know when you have a vision that big, the big
Hmm.
things are absolutely going to happen, right?
Thank you.
There's just
Yeah.
no, that's just, it's, it's inherent again in that, right? So
Yeah.
I just wish you all the luck in the world. And again, thank you so much for what you're doing. Um, for yourself and
Thank
what you're
you.
yeah, right, and what you're doing for people who've been so wounded and so misunderstood.
Yeah.
So
Thank you,
all right,
Holly.
okay, thank you, Lisa. You take care and have a beautiful rest of your day. Okay,
You as well.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Bye bye.